Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, I don't want to say that the sky is falling for Dallas, but there are bits and pieces falling from the stadium ceiling.
I love that it's Jerry World that's doing that, because like you couldn't have set it up better for like this kind of catastrophe. Jerry complaining about people complaining about the curtains in the stadium, and then just for it to like protest and just fall apart. Yeah, incredible. It seems a bit too on the nose, but they can't win at home, and when they play at home, they lose by over 20. Right, they can't win at home. Home can't win with them. It's perfect.
And realistically, it's not even the best stadium collapse of all time. Like, even if you were talking about things falling from the ceiling that didn't involve the whole roof caving in, the King Dome is still better than that.
Oh, what a beautiful, beautiful implosion. Mm-hmm. A highlight implosion. I don't know if anyone's ever seen the King Dome video, but I highly recommend it. It's like aesthetically satisfying.
Yeah. I imagine that it made all that time you've spent following Seattle sports worth it just to see that one fall.
God, no, I set myself up for that, didn't I?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh my God.
I don't believe you have a Seattle corner. But welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. The Vikings won, and it wasn't super close. We have a bunch of stuff to talk about as far as the Titans game is concerned. Vikings walk away with a victory, so good. That's better than the opposite. It's better than being the Jags this week. How about that? So we will be talking about that. We'll be going over some around the league stuff, and of course the mailbag. But before we start any of that, again, thank you for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to help us out financially, there's a couple ways you can do that. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode for $3.50 a month, or a little less for the year subscription. You get access to the bonus materials. You get access to Discord, all of that. I'll probably have a new bonus episode out here in the next week or so check that out. I've been cranking them out a lot lately, which also means that we'll be doing the annual Christmas episode this year. We didn't do one last year. We will be doing one this year. I'm much more apt to want to go through and relive this year as opposed to last. So new episodes will be coming out here shortly over at Patreon, but check that out, patreon.com/NorseCode. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up any number of wonderful pieces of merchandise. We've got shirts, we got baby onesies, we got the Christmas socks, which are always a wonderful stocking stuffer. So check that out. Baby onesies, shower curtains, all of that over at the Threadless store. And just a reminder that we are doing our live show December 12th, Union 32 Craft House. We are giving away tickets to the Vikings-Bears Monday night game. So check that out. Eagan, Minnesota, December 12th, Union 32 Craft House. Arif has been mean to me online about what he thinks the Christmas gift is going to be. I am
anticipating your meanness is all that's happening.
I
pretend to act offended.
I recognize I've made poor choices in the past that have not made you feel like I have your best interest at heart. I am trying to buck that trend. One of the two gifts came today. And I looked at it, inspected it, everything looks good for it. So I'm happy with it.
Here's the thing about like apologies and forgiveness and restitution is I don't have to forgive. I'm not obligated to forgive you. Like that's not part of like the only reason forgiveness has any value is because there's no obligation to it. If there was, there would be no value. It would just be part of a script. So until I see it, I won't believe it.
I really feel like you should just be able to after this long on the show, you should just be able to you should be able to trust me.
Name one reason I should trust you.
I keep showing up to do the show and I keep doing my job reasonably well.
You like the show. That has nothing to do with me.
That's it. Well, hold on. We'll tackle that after the word. But no. I'm just what I'm saying is that I really feel like you should ease off of this one. I promise And I don't promise often. I promise this will be something that you actually do like. We're also giving away a bunch of Norse Code merch as well that day. So check us out over at the Union 32 Craft House, Eagan, Minnesota, December 12th, about 7:30 or so. There will be a game playing that evening as well on the TVs, and then we'll have us going on the speakers and over in the corner. So really looking forward to it. You guys packed the house last time. I'm looking forward to hopefully doing that again. So Eagan, Minnesota, December 12th, Union 32 Craft House. So let's talk about the Vikings' victory over the Tennessee Titans. What a perfect game. What a perfect day for football. Was not the best day running the ball. And I guess the thing I want to start with is the defense. The defense was able to smother Will Levis, and then Will Levis was able to launch a couple of really nice passes over the heads of the defenders. One led to a 98-yard touchdown, and one would have led to a touchdown if not for a procedural penalty. So what exactly is going on here? What kind of defense are we looking at?
I'm actually not remarkably concerned. I mean, obviously the nature of the defense is that it's going to give up explosives, and the trade-off is that teams will not be good, from down to down. They won't be consistently successful from down to down. So teams will have a low success rate, and they're going to try to make those successes count, and that means explosives. This was a particularly bad explosive to give up, the 98-yard one. But also, I'm not that concerned about actually, they also gave up like a 23-yarder as well to Nick Akine Westbrook that was also called back on basically an identical procedural penalty. So I'm not concerned about the 51-yarder or the 23-yarder. And the reason is because the genesis of those procedural penalties is the Titans being so afraid of the Vikings pass rush that Isaiah Prince is lining up a yard away from the center. Like, I kid you not, the front foot of Isaiah Prince is a full yard away from the back foot of the center. His helmet is fully behind the center's behind. Like, it's just, he's so far off the line of scrimmage. And he's not the only one. The guard was like that. The left guard and left tackle were like that. They were lined up so far off the line of scrimmage that, and it was obviously because they were terrified of the Vikings pass rush. And the thing is, on the 51-yarder to Calvin Ridley, Pat Jones was milliseconds away from a sack. Like that was one of his 5 quarterback hits, and he was like in the air, like leaping onto Will Levis as the ball was getting released. Like, had there not been an illegal formation there, had he not lined up so far back in order to get depth against somebody like Pat Jones, it would have been a sack. So I'm actually not that concerned, because that's literally the game that they're always playing. They always say, like, hey, if you've got 3 seconds, you'll probably find someone open, because we've only got 4 guys back there in deep coverage, and they're kind of in a zone. So you'll probably find someone if you've got 3 seconds back there, but you will never have 3 seconds back there. That's how they play. And so, yeah, that's just, I'm not that concerned, because this was a situation where the procedural penalties were a product of the way that the Vikings are successful on defense. So that doesn't concern me. Obviously, you can't give up a 90-yard touchdown every game because not everybody is going to play as poorly down to down as the Titans did. But it should be noted, the Titans had the 3rd worst success rate of any offense this year in a single game, with a 25% success rate. Only 15 of their 64 or whatever plays were successful. And so that, I think, kind of demonstrates the overall effectiveness of the defensive approach, that there were only 2 other games that any offense played this year that could get less done down to down, 22% and a 25%. This was 25.4% or something like that. So, yeah, I'm not that concerned about it. And it's really kind of a situation where it's like, okay, well, if you give up a 98-yard touchdown every game, and that's also the only touchdown you give up, you're probably in a good spot. Don't worry about it. It's fine. The defense is good. This is the second fewest points the Titans have put together this year. They had a 10-point game earlier in the year, and I think that was against the Browns back when the Browns defense was good. So that's it. There's like a 14-point game against the Lions. That's like the closest. But no, this is like, it's a good defense. It's just, you don't want to see that, but that's kind of the risk that you take. And, you've got Josh Metellus in man coverage against a receiver. Calvin Ridley, a good receiver, right? Like, so, yeah, I don't know. Don't want it.
They were clearly going for the safety there. Clearly,
which I love, by the way. Yeah, just do that. Like, do that every time, because that, first of all, safety's rule. Second, that's not going to happen every time you take that kind of risk. Like, you might give up a 20-yarder, 30-yarder, whatever. But yeah, you got them back. Get a safety. Get the ball back. Get 2 points. That rules. Get a scoregami. That's what I'm here for.
That's, at this point, it's gambling and scoregami. These are the two things that are fueling Arif. That and spite.
Yeah. Those are the three kind of combinatory elements that are my fuel source.
Yeah, and sometimes if you get a safety for spite, it's even better. So, as far as the game is concerned, why were the Vikings so effective at taking out Levis? And will that offensive line of his be tried for war crimes later next week?
I think it's more kind of like less war crimes, more desertion crimes, more like crimes that a military would charge upon its own soldiers, like AWOL type stuff. Then it was not something that the convention. They weren't doing damage to anyone else. That's for sure. Yeah,
they were not good.
Yeah. No, that was bad. No, this was like a uniquely perfect situation for the Vikings defense and the way it's set up. Will Levis likes to hold on to the ball a lot. He has the highest pressure to sack ratio in the NFL of starting quarterbacks. I think the only one higher is Spencer Rattler, who is no longer starting. And he's got one of the highest kind of induced pressure rates, depending on how you judge it and who's assigning pressures to the quarterback. But he's up there. And so he invites a lot of pressure, and then he turns that pressure into sacks a lot. His sack rate is like 11%. It's the highest in the NFL. So there's that. There's the fact that the offensive line has gotten worse every week for the Titans as they continue to sustain injuries and don't return anyone to the offensive line, and no one seems to be getting like any better while that's happening. So the offensive line continues to get worse. Will Levis continues to make the offensive line look even worse than it is. And then they get behind in games and they have to throw the ball. So, like, it's just bad. It's bad all the way down for them. And it was the perfect setup for exactly what the Vikings try to do on defense. And so, yeah, they just kind of teed off on the guy. Eventually, the Titans were like, yeah, we just got to read option or something, which also didn't work because the Vikings are, like, elite against the run. So that's not helping you, actually. But, yeah, they were, like, lost by the second quarter.
It's beautiful to watch. I really did enjoy that part of it. And as far as the other side of the ball is concerned, the offense didn't make as many mistakes. It's not like we had a multiple interception game or anything like that. Darnold, for the most part, was able to keep things under control, but there was still the occasional dropped ball. And in the case of a specific attempted run, it was not a good-looking fumble.
Yeah, so, and technically there were 2 fumbles, but the second one was recovered by the fumbler, Aaron Jones. I'll say this, I think Sam Darnold played outstandingly. This is one of his best games.
Wasn't it like the best QB rating of his career or something like that?
I saw someone on PFF say it was like the best PFF grade of his career. It might be the best like ESPN QBR or something like that. It probably isn't the best QBR or anything because like that relies on the catches being completed. And like you mentioned, there were a number of receiver drops, including a really like just a dot in the end zone
that Naylor
to Jalen
Naylor. Got to get in,
Yeah, that was so pretty, man. But yeah, that was a really good game from Darnold. And it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I can see how he got there, and that was really excellent, and he deserves, his plaudits for that. But that is like a product of kind of his high volatility playing style where he'll take a lot of chances, both with the ball and also just kind of how he manages the pocket. That's not always going to work the way he just like spins out of stuff and creates something out of nothing. He's always going to try to do that. And on some days it'll work and on some days it won't. This is the day where it worked. And also his chanciness with the ball as he was throwing it, it worked. And so the result is a really high leverage game where he's playing outstandingly, or the products of his play are outstanding. I don't expect that to sustain itself, but I also think this is like pretty good evidence for my thesis that he actually wasn't getting that much worse after week 5. Like, I expressed a concern weeks 1 through 5 that he was getting worse every week. And then he finally like loses a game, and then he loses the next game. And I actually don't think in those losses he was playing all that poorly. I thought that he played better than in some of the wins. And then, he has the 3 interception game, but aside from the picks, he actually was playing a lot better than somebody who throws a lot of picks in a game usually does. So, he's been playing pretty well, and this is pretty good evidence of that, but I don't think he's going to play this well for the rest of the season. If he does, the Vikings are like Super Bowl contenders. Like, that's how well he was playing in this game. But, really good to see. Would have been nice to see kind of more from the supporting cast. That includes the offensive line, especially from a run blocking perspective. The offensive line was actually pretty good in pass protection. Darnold still kind of held onto the ball a little bit. He was very decisive on a lot of plays, more than he typically is, but there were plays where he's holding onto the ball a little bit, and he still only had a pressure rate of like 24, 25%. That's fantastic work from the offensive line and the pass protection unit overall. But from a run blocking perspective, there was not a lot of space for Aaron Jones. Jones himself was making mistakes. You alluded to the fumble, which Darnold did play a small role in that. The broadcast maybe overemphasized it a little bit when they're like, yeah, he threw it a couple inches behind him. It's like, well, yeah, that's going to happen. That's the job. Mostly Aaron Jones's fault. Obviously, in the box score, it goes down as a fumble for Darnold. It's just on handoffs. It's on the quarterback because you must possess the ball in order to fumble it. But yeah, I mean, the running wasn't completely there. Cam Akers kind of showed up a little bit later and had a couple of explosive runs, which is nice. The Titans were over-focused on Justin Jefferson, which is kind of the goal. But then you need, Addison and Naylor to really pay back that extra space that's being afforded them. Hawkinson played pretty well, but he didn't get a ton of targets. He got like 3. I think he caught 2 of them. Oliver played all right as a receiver. He was actually really good as a run blocker again. I think he had like 3 catches and 3 targets. So we did see some complimentary kind of receiving, but a lot of it was put on Justin Jefferson, who had another one of his quiet 80-plus days, right? Like, just, he's pretty quiet. And you look at the end of the day, and it's like 81 yards. Great, but you kind of hope for a little bit more production from everybody else if Jefferson's quote-unquote only getting 80 yards. So great game by Darnold. From a pass protection standpoint, great game by the offensive line. From a run blocking standpoint, not so much. Just not as much was happening around them, but they have played on balance largely better over the course of the year. So I'm less worried about them than I would be about, if Darnold had a bad game and we had to talk about whether or not, the shine is worn off of him. If Addison and Naylor have bad games, I'm just like, it sucks. They're young. They might have a better game. We've seen them play better before. If Darnold has a bad game, we have a conversation about like whether or not it's done. So that's kind of how I'd prefer it to be, because I've got a lot more faith in the rest of that group. I am a little bit concerned about the state of the run game going forward. I've got Luke Braun writing a piece on the difference between Dalton Reisner and Ed Ingram and what Reisner looked like when he was inserted into this lineup, and how that might differ from having Ingram out there. I'm kind of curious about it, so we'll see.
Yeah, it's worth noting that it was not something that happened early in the week where this was decided. And Reisner famously has never played that side before. So I don't know, would you necessarily blame that, or would you blame something else? Because it's not like the Titans defense is horrible. They are surprisingly competent considering their record.
Especially up front. The secondary, pretty suspect, but up front, that's kind of where your concerns are. Being able to hold up against like T'Vondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons, that's like really meaningful because those are like genuinely quite good players. And I don't think that Reisner, he was actually really good in pass protection. Really good. He was good in pass protection. As a run blocker, that was kind of where the problems were for him. And that's kind of always been true for him. I don't think his PFF grade last year as a run blocker was all that bad, but you kind of noticed that he just didn't have the movement capability of other guards in similar schemes. Like, he was certainly no Ezra Cleveland from a movement perspective. Absolutely not. I think they had like similar testing numbers too, which kind of goes to show that sometimes it doesn't always bear out, especially along the offensive line. But I say similar. I mean, Ezra Cleveland had outstanding testing numbers for a guard, and Dalton Reisner was good. But yeah, you just don't see that kind of movement, and I think that may have played a role here. The left-right thing, you always want to be cognizant of it. I imagine that he'd been kind of cross-training on both sides as soon as he had arrived, or at least been playing a bunch on the right side as soon as he arrived. But that's not as much time as you would kind of hope for that kind of transition, because you kind of have to remap, kind of your habits, which is really difficult to do. So that may have played a role, certainly. I think that if you lose a little bit of that run game and gain a little bit more in the passing game, that is generally pretty worth it. It just kind of sucks because the Vikings did invest quite a bit to make sure that run game was working.
I'm reminded of of what happened during tonight's game when Dallas was at 4th and 2, and they were real close to scoring. They didn't end up making it, and it gave the green light to go for it. And my first thought was, oh yeah, Dallas could absolutely go for it here if they had a run game.
Yeah.
If Cooper Rush, if Rush wasn't throwing 50 times this game, yeah, you could absolutely make it there.
He had like 54 attempts, which is great because Luke Braun had the under on his pass completion. So keep it up.
Yeah, that. He definitely was going way, way over that. It was uncomfortable to watch. But one thing that is happening, and is happening a lot lately, is some success from Sam Darnold with quarterback sneaks as well. Like, this is something that is kind of nice to see, quite frankly, because we haven't had a quarterback who could do this for a while consistently.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious, like, what role the quarterback plays in that. Generally speaking, it's not a ton, but we've seen it like where like, Jalen Hurts does play a pretty big role in it. I think some of it's just kind of like, what can you expect your quarterback to sustain on these? Because a lot of it is, how good your center guard combo is, whichever one you're running behind. And you've got to have the ability to kind of pick up on it. But I think it is meaningful. The Vikings are doing it more with Darnold than they ever did with Cousins. I mean, Cousins had a couple of quarterback sneaks, but like, this is like a really consistent feature. And Darnold has showcased that he generally has more mobility than Cousins. And those don't have to track with each other, mobility and the capacity to sneak. I mean, Brady is one of the best sneakers, right, in NFL history. So, like, that doesn't necessarily match. But I think just the Vikings having more confidence in his ability to kind of sustain that damage, despite the fact that he's, like, missed more games throughout his career than Cousins has. It probably speaks to something. But I guess I don't know everything about that to say what it speaks to, other than the Vikings are clearly doing it more often, and that means something. So I'm just kind of curious about that.
It's happened enough where it's noticeable. It's not something that's happened enough where it's like, I say sustainable, but it's not something that we can like track at this point. But it's a nice it's a nice addition to the offense, if nothing else.
Yeah, no, it's good to have. It's always great when you've got like that element where you don't have to get all the yards on 3rd and 10, right? For you to be able, like, you don't have to, send everybody to the sticks. You've got some opportunities to kind of convert on 4th down, which gives you a lot more strategic options, and it makes it much more likely that the defense doesn't have, doesn't have the ability to just play one or two defenses, and they have to play the whole field. And yeah, just having that sneak gives you that kind of flexibility.
Addison had a really good little game, despite the fact that on one of the hits it looked like he was bent backwards.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool actually that he can survive like like these insane hits.
It was one of those things where if it would not have been out of place to see that hit on a late 80s, early 90s best of NFL Bone Crunchers like VHS.
Yeah, exactly. Which, what a dead art, right?
It's uncomfortable to see those on YouTube now, but at the time,
yeah, that ruled then. I was pretty happy about seeing those. But no, he took that, and then he took the one that was a penalty, which I guess I'm just in the minority on that one. I do think that was a penalty.
It looked like a launch. But but less in the NFL sense of the word, and more in the NHL sense of the word, where it looked like he left his feet,
left the ice. Yeah,
it looked like he left it. Yeah, it looked like he left the ice. That was it.
So my take on this is, and then I watched a couple of replays because a lot of people disagreed with me, And I think a lot of people were focusing, because he does clearly hit him in the chest, but I thought the crown of the helmet hit him in the chin or the bottom of the face mask, and the way his head snapped back, it looked like that. The problem is, of course, like there's a football in the way of our ability to kind of see that from the typical angle that people were using. I agree that he, like, quote unquote, led with his shoulder, whatever that means, into the chest. I don't agree that it's unambiguous that he didn't hit the guy in the helmet. To me, it's actually pretty clear that he hit Addison in the helmet or the chin. But a lot of people disagree with that, which is fair. But I think that either way, at the end of the day, he like left his feet, right, in order to launch himself, which is what the broadcast was talking about. Like, or rather, the rules analyst on the broadcast was talking about. The broadcast was like, I cannot believe that they called this penalty.
Broadcast was trash.
Yeah, the broadcast, it was insane. And then they brought on the ref or the rules analyst, former ref. Rules analyst was like, yeah, and you kind of don't want to call this for head and neck area. But he did leave his feet. I was like, okay, yeah, fair enough. They did ask the reporters or the referees after the game in, they have a ref pool, a pool report rather, where somebody goes and asks the refs. And they asked a couple of questions unrelated to it, but they first asked about this. And the ref said chest and neck area, which is not the phrase I would use if I wanted to justify that being a penalty. That seems like you're just saying stuff to make it sound like that's a rule. Yeah, that's not the rule. Chest and neck area. Come on, man. Just a lie at that point. So yeah, but Addison being able to hold on to the ball through all of that, fantastic. Would have been nice if he was able to kind of reel that sideline one in. Was a bit high, so like fair enough. But I think that getting muscled out at the sideline was part of that, and I think that a lot of receivers might have been able to either find a way to get that second foot down, which is asking a ton. Like, I couldn't do that, right? But that's the job. Or create a little bit more space for himself and not get muscled out early in the route to create a better throw and give yourself a little bit more room to land. Either way, kind of a small detail on that one. Good game from Addison, though.
That was a great touchdown.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
that was so fun.
We've got that one.
Yak.
But we've also got Naylor, who had it dropped perfectly dropped perfectly for him, and he just could not come up with that.
Yeah, and I get that there was like a lot of defenders near him, but yeah, you got to hold on to that. You got to. Hopefully that doesn't keep happening. Sam pointed out he's got a really high drop rate this year. Given kind of the low number of total catchable targets, that's not something that I think is a large enough concern for me to think that there's a problem, but it's certainly something to kind of monitor going forward, because it's not like you can have a high drop rate because you just haven't had as many catchable targets early in the season. So I think that's closer. I really like his ability to get open, and that is a more durable trait than year-to-year drop rates. And so there's a good chance, or a better chance, he'll clean that up than if he wasn't able to get open consistently. So I still think that he's a good player, but that was a pretty disappointing game from him for sure.
I do have to mention, because it affected Hell League people, that we got our first mixed extra point from the from the serial killer. I'm just going to refer to him as that because everyone refers to him with his middle name.
Oh, Parker Romo?
With Parker Romo. Like, I can't... Was it like William Parker Romo or whatever? Like, I can't...
John Parker Romo.
Yeah, John Parker Romo. All of these people who, like, commit assassinations, whenever they get put into, like, the news or whatever, they all have 3 names. So you list their full name. It's a Tribe Called Quest. You have to say the whole thing. Like... John Parker Romo missed his first extra point. It was a doink. It was a resounding doink, but I still had a moment of I want Reichard back. we got a couple of weeks. I want Reichard back. I don't like this uncertainty here, but okay. So we do have that. Is there much more to say about the game? Like, this is a game that the Vikings should have won, and they did. At the same time, you had the Lions absolutely decimate the Jags, to the point where everyone is still surprised Doug Peterson still has a job. As of this recording, which is at 11:36 p.m. on Monday night, he is still employed by the Jacksonville Jaguars, much to the amazement of most of the league.
Yeah, I like how specific you were about that, because by the time our listeners hear this, that could change for sure. So I'm glad that you did that. The Lions. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, the first 7 possessions were touchdowns. The next possession was a field goal, and then the final possession was end of game. They scored on every possession. they never punted. That I can't. Come on, dude.
I enjoyed, as somebody who had Goff in fantasy, I just sat there and just went, no, I think Goff against the Jags is going to be a good matchup, and then just said it and just forgot about it and checked on it yesterday. Like, oh my God, yeah, that worked. That's
I had a couple of touchdown overs in various parlays that had different members of the Lions. I was like, okay, well, this parlay is going to be like a David Montgomery one. This one's going to be a Jahmyr Gibbs one. This is going to be an Amon-Ra St. Brown one, and like all of them hit their touchdown overs. It was really just up to whatever else was happening in the rest of the legs. It was crazy. I'd never seen that in my life.
Let's we're gonna just transition into the what have we learned this week thing, and I want to keep discussing this game because is it possible that the Lions are peaking too early? Like we kind of talked about this last episode, but they are hitting on absolutely all cylinders right now, but
ignore what I said last episode about how that doesn't happen. It's impossible, and the data doesn't support that idea. That's absolutely happening to the Lions. Don't worry about them. They're going to get knocked out of the playoffs. They won't have the steam anymore. They overexerted themselves. There's only so many points you get in a season plus postseason. People don't realize this. God just assigns you a number of points, and so you can't use them all up too early. And I think that's what the Lions are doing.
Yeah, it's the same reason why the Chiefs tanked against the Bills.
Yeah, no, they're playing it so smart. Good Lord. If you want to see a team that knows exactly how to use their God-given points, it's the Chiefs.
It's absolutely the Chiefs. No, we need to we're going to send our kicker over to get some surgery. Hopefully the female anesthesiologist has a funny look for him when he is wheeled in there. But otherwise, like, yeah, this is a team that knows what it's doing. As far as things we learned this week, the first thing I do want to mention is that apparently the Bengals can bungle harder than the Chargers can Charger this week, apparently.
Yeah, that was nuts. I mean, that was a great. I love that the world got to see that Justin Herbert's actually good, even if it was for only the first half. That was crazy. Joe Burrow continues to have like really strong play in clutch moments, and like nothing comes of it. Like the broadcast, I think, showed a graphic where like a stat that had the total number of games he played, and then also the number of game-winning drives he had, it was just 6. And I don't think the graphic was suggesting that he's not very good at it, but that's what I got from it. That's what was communicated to me. Of course, I did that study on quarterback clutchness, and Joe Burrow showed up as essentially the unluckiest quarterback in quarterback clutchness. I feel like this game is like a pretty good example of that. Like the Bengals defense clearly let them down, and he kept on putting them into position to score field goals, and there were like 3 missed field goals. Like that's the game. Like they win, right? So he definitely got screwed. I know the guy who does the quarterback analysis, Scott Kazmar. He hates this. He's like, that's not clutch. 30-yard drive to set up a 46-yard field goal. Like, yeah, that's the job now. Like, that's clutch enough for me. It's a 1-score game. You got to make those field goals. But yeah, that was crazy. Jim Harbaugh sucking the Charger out of the Chargers is nuts. If they like start winning in the playoffs because of this, I'll be amazed.
Yeah, but I think we both knew that the moment that McPherson came out to attempt that kick, it wasn't going in.
Yeah, no, that's true.
I've I admittedly was a little surprised to see the Chargers win it because, as everyone has said, we've seen this before. So that was a little different. Bold of the decision makers to put this game on a Sunday night.
That was crazy. I mean, if they wanted a bunch of weird back and forths and stuff like that, they got it for sure. I would have expected, I don't know, the Chiefs Bills to be the and not that we didn't get a primetime game out of them, but it was just like, why? Like, why did that happen? Why do we get Bengals Chargers? That's crazy. Why do we get Texans Cowboys?
We got Texans Cowboys because Jerry Jones is apparently.
That's true. I guess I should have been like a lot of people, including me, expected the Cowboys to be better than this at the beginning of the year. But man, that sucks.
Yeah, and they are most definitely not that. I was trying to explain the defensive and offensive problems for Dallas, and I made the realization after I would like finish talking about it. Oh wait, I forgot about this. Oh wait, I forgot about that. Oh wait, their running back room is like the oldest in the league. What else? Oh, and the worst in the league too. What else? Oh, they were able to beat the Browns on week 1, and every time they've taken the field after that, it's not looked great. What else? Oh, they can't win at home. What else?
Oh, what else? The offensive line is injured. Oh, what else? The offensive line got injured again during the game.
2 plays in a row. What else? Oh, their stadium is turning into a metaphor for their entire year. What else? Like
that's never good. There's not a situation where when your stadium is a metaphor for your season, that the stadium is doing well, no, right?
It's
like there's just
it's blinding your receivers when they're trying to catch balls in the daytime, and it's falling apart at night when you're trying to open it.
Perfect, ideal.
That is that's everything you want in a stadium, quite frankly. Also, we did get to see the Colts beat Aaron Rodgers, which is just so funny. I love that. I love that personally. I cannot wait. And it's also worth noting with the decision to bench the greatest quarterback to ever win against the Vikings in a playoff game. It's worth noting that Daniel Jones being benched and put in 3rd place. He's listed as the
crazy.
3rd starter.
He's third.
They're putting Tommy Cutlets out there.
Why isn't it Drew Lock? I'm so confused by all 3 of these decisions, right?
There was something about Drew Lock's contract which would end up paying him a lot more money if he were to be starting games. Like if he was going to just like finish out the rest of the year.
Well, okay, what is the point? Like, why are you like? Clearly, they're not trying to win games, but like that's like the whole. I'd be so mad if I was his agent. Holy crap. But like your goal is to win games. What are you like? Oh, I'm worried about the contract implications. Fine, you won games. Who cares? Contract implications. That's very stupid. That is an extremely unserious franchise if that's anywhere near the motivation for not starting Drew Lock added Tommy Cutlets. That's crazy to me.
Yeah. So I'm going to send you the tweet that I've been seeing today about it, and you can kind of parse it as I'll distract the listeners with my lovely, lovely voice. And don't you dare hit the next 15 seconds or 30 seconds forward. I know who you are. Arif is coming to get you. But it's very possible that this is the reason why, and it's not great. But Drew Lock should technically be better than DeVito. We know what DeVito is. We saw him last year, and he was fun for 2 games. I think Josh Dobbs was good for longer than DeVito was.
That's true, but people were more attracted to DeVito because A, you got the Cutlet story, but B, New York, right?
Yeah.
So that's just like part of it.
That was the football version of Linsanity, and it was just all Italian.
Yes, exactly. All right, so I looked it up. So you sent me a tweet that had the Drew Lock playing time incentives in it. I looked it up to see if that was like real, right? Because it's just a screenshot. I don't know if this guy's telling the truth. Looks like he is. So here are the incentives. So he's got playing time incentives for hitting any one of these milestones. So he's got a $250,000 playing time incentive for hitting 40% of the snaps over the course of his contract. It's a 1-year contract, so this year essentially, right? $250,000 for 50%, another $250,000 for 60%, another $250,000 for 70%. So if he plays that percentage of snaps, he gets that. Now, you can throw that away if he hits team incentives along with it. So if he plays anywhere between 55 to 69, nice percent of his, the team snaps, and they make the playoffs, that's $500,000. This replaces the playing time incentives. If you play 70% of the snaps or more and they make the playoffs, that is on top of that an additional $500,000. If he has 224 attempts, he qualifies for a number of statistics. So a 92.5 or greater passer rating, $250,000, 65% or greater completion percentage, $250,000. Those two are highly correlated, so I find that interesting. If he gets an 88 passer rating or greater and gets 15 plus touchdown passes, $250,000. If he has an 88 passer rating or greater and he has 2,000 passing yards, another $250,000. So the total number of contract incentives on his 1 year, $5 million deal can add up to, he can maximize up to $3 million on top of the five. 40, like these are relatively low incentives. So I'm hoping that actually did not play a role in the decision because, futzing around with like a couple of $500,000 incentives, kind of nuts to me, especially because only $1 million can be made from playing time incentives. The rest requires some level of quality, including the team incentives. And so you want that. Like you want him to meet his passer rating incentive because now they're throwing at nearly 100 passer rating, which is the standard for quarterbacks in the NFL these days, right? He's completing passes. You want that. So I can't imagine that that's like the reason. But if it is, that's extremely short-sighted because this is really small. And the way incentives work in the NFL, by the way, is it will come out of your cap next year just because of the way that, it's not likely to be earned this year. It turns into a likely to be earned next year. You have to pay that money. It comes out of the cap. And then because, if you've signed him to another deal and it has the same incentives in them, because I switched from unlikely to be earned to likely to be earned because he's already hit them, now you take that on again a second time for that year's contract. It's actually the reason the Vikings cut Antoine Winfield back in was it 2013? Something like that. Because he hit all of his incentives the previous year and his contract had the same incentives for the next year. And so the Vikings were hit with the cap hit that year for the incentives he hit last year and the cap hit again that year for the incentives that he was quote unquote likely to hit that year. So they had to cut him. Hated that. Bad move. Don't do that. And I think kind of a similar-ish situation, except Drew Lock is not nearly as cool as Antoine Winfield.
There are a few things on this show that I would agree with more. Antoine Winfield definitely better than Drew Lock, or at least more cool. Anyway, well, yeah. Let's get to the mailbag. We've got quite the mailbag here. Dustin asks, is there anything the Vikings can do to get face masks on Darnold called? Give him a big dark helmet to accentuate the movement, perhaps?
If I don't they could just change their gloves, right? Like you want white gloves and dark face masks or white face masks and dark gloves. You can't control that. They can change their gloves game day. So I don't know that could help. And he does have a dark helmet and it does accentuate the movement. I don't know that there's anything else he could do.
It's worth noting that there were
wigs. So there's like hair, like yeah. Louis Scola was always flopping for the Rockets way back when.
There you go. It's worth noting that there were a number of questionable calls that were put on the Titans all game, and a number of things just were falling the Vikings' way on that. Obviously there were big plays that kept on getting called back and everything for Tennessee, but there was at least one moment where it wasn't a penalty the Vikings got called, and I don't think any Vikings fan was truly upset. You just kind of looked at it and went, okay, they got 4, we'll take 1.
Yeah, the Titans took on 91 yards of penalties. So
that one in the end zone on 4th down.
That one stung. One stung for sure.
I almost expected an ejection. I haven't seen a coach that heated in a while.
That was nuts. And it's like the second time that's happened with the Vikings.
Right.
The opposing coach almost gets ejected.
Like, he got a penalty. Like, that was fantastic. They called one on him. It was great.
That ruled.
Not one you see often. Let's go to Don't Hit the Post, Man. For James's Vibes Vestibule, last week Arif mentioned the Inspectors of the Post, the oldest federal enforcement agency in America. Sources close to my post office indicate an impending investigation into crimes committed against the Post in Nashville Sunday. How will this affect locker room vibes?
So, the vibes will tank, but that's it's kind of like it's already happening. So there's not really much you could do. Certainly, a federal investigation of this seriousness is going to really put a pallor over a locker room that had otherwise been celebratory, but it's not even that.
It was a hell of a doink. It was a
hell of a doink.
Hell of a doink. I hate Carmelin, which we still have no idea what he's talking about.
Yeah, they didn't clarify. Okay,
Nothing.
Great.
Question. Not sure if it's just the Vikings slate this year or league-wide, but it feels like quarterback play has really tanked across the league except for the top 5 guys or so. Is this reality or just recency bias?
So the impression I'm getting from the way other people are talking about it, I haven't super looked in it crazy deeply, except at the beginning of the season when everyone was talking about it. But my impression is statistically anyway, quarterback play has tanked. I think by PFF grade, the last time someone looked into this, quarterback play is a little bit worse too. So it's not just the statistics. It's kind of all of the microprocesses that get graded by PFF. There's a couple of different data points that suggest that the quarterback play has taken a dive. But it is still more effective than it was in 2017. We're still getting higher quality quarterback play, at least in terms of the way offenses are advancing down the field and stuff like that, than we were 7 years ago. So it's all relative. I mean, quarterback play was quite good in 2019, and then since then it's been kind of taking a small dive. And whether or not that's because we've had a lot of really high quality quarterbacks retire, or because defenses are getting better, or because the rules are finally kind of shifting in the defense's favor, or because of coverage shells, or whatever, right? It is a little bit less effective than it used to be. That's not just a product of watching the Vikings, at least based off of what I've seen. That seems to be kind of a persistent theme of the way people have been talking about quarterbacks this year.
Next question is going to be from Sam, who asks, do you think the strategy of doubling a top receiver with a safety and a number 2 corner while leaving the number 1 corner on the second receiver is oversimplified? Analysts often point to Belichick's success with this and suggest it as a viable strategy, but he had elite cornerback talent that most teams lack. By trying to replicate this, are teams just setting themselves up to fail, leaving safeties exposed against players like Justin Jefferson?
So I looked into this a little bit. I don't know that the second cornerback on Belichick teams was always that astounding. It was Logan Ryan or Malcolm Butler, but after he had fallen off, or the other McCourty, Jason McCourty, right? And the top one was Darrelle Revis or Stephon Gilmore or something, right? The top one was always quite good, or I shouldn't say always, typically quite good. But the second one was just pretty good, right? And I think that that's kind of where you hope to be, but also I don't think that it's fair to say that these guys were always elite. Now they overperform in New England compared to somewhere else. J.C. Jackson's a good example of that. I think Jack Jones is a decent example of that. But I wouldn't call them really high level great corners or anything like that. So yeah, your number 1 was elite, but I don't know that your number 2, which is the question's talking about putting the number 2 into a bind against Jefferson. I don't know that the number 2 is typically that much worse than it was for Belichick. A lot of those number 2s were kind of whatever. So yeah, it is overly simplistic, but all football analysis typically is oversimplistic because it's really difficult to kind of dig into what the coaches are thinking or kind of how exactly, these players are evaluating the evolution of a play over the course of the play. But no, I think that it's a fine way to discuss it, especially as more teams seemingly have kind of added it to their arsenal of ways to kind of take on, teams with one elite receiver like the Vikings.
Next question is from Matt, who asks, is the run defense actually good now? If so, how did that happen? Are Bullard and Tillery a big part of that? I don't think I've heard their names much since training camp. Well, I know Bullard was mentioned like right away in like one of the first plays of the game. I do know that.
Bullard's been having a great year. But no, the Vikings run defense is extremely good this year. I mean, it's one of the top run defenses in the NFL by basically any measure. I mean, you can look at it by total yards allowed, which the Vikings, I believe, are still number one in. Obviously, that matters a little bit less because it's about when people choose to run or pass. The Vikings were blowing teams out early in the year, and so they led the league in pass attempts against. So that's not a great measure to use, but you can look at rate measures, whether it's yards per carry or expected points allowed or, rush yards over expectation allowed or whatever, right? And they've been really good, elite in essentially every element of that category. We've got like a lot of players that are playing really well in run defense. I'm taking a quick look at what we've got. So I think that it's fair to say that players like Jerry Tillery are not racking up a lot of statistics and not generating a ton of that run defense. And I think it's also fair to say that players like Harrison Phillips, players like Jonathan Bullard, are playing a lot of snaps and not getting a ton of tackles for it, but we're seeing a ton of tackles for players like Andrew Van Ginkel, for Blake Cashman, who, when he was gone, we kind of noticed his absence. Ivan Pace, who's been a little bit better against the run this year. Harrison Smith has been outstanding against the run. I think a lot of the positive plays against the run are coming from like your Josh Metellis's, not necessarily from your Jerry Tillery's. So I think that that's more to do with it than their production, although they are kind of helping enforce better linebacker play by keeping guards occupied and stuff like that. I mean, Harrison Phillips is having a really good year from that perspective. But yeah, I mean, we're seeing a lot of really good stuff from players like Metellus in the run game. So I think that is the reason, even if you're not hearing like Jerry Tillery's name a ton. I mean, he's played 300 snaps this year. Like, it's not as if like he's absent from the field, but the role that he's playing, and he's playing it all right. I'm not saying he's outstanding. The role that he's playing is not to create the plays themselves, but to give opportunities for other players to make those plays.
Next question is from Skull8084, who asks, do you think Aaron Jones' uneven performance over the last few games is mostly due to the accumulation of injuries or due to updates on the O-line? Do you think it would make sense to rest him a bit? Also, when did Jim Harbaugh fully morph into Bubbles from the Trailer Park Boys?
And if you watch Jim Harbaugh, his pressers at Michigan the last couple of years, like those glasses got a little bit thicker. That's been happening. As for Aaron Jones, it's tough because like running back play tends to vary a lot anyway. So I don't want to like overstate it, but like the last 3 games have been a lot more lackluster, and I think that's a fair observation. I don't know I think it probably has a little bit more to do with the offensive line than the injuries, but I think you want to pay attention to the injuries. Like, I think that's like a fair thing to bring up. But, losing Christian Darrisaw, that to me is huge. He was a great run blocker. Replacing him with David Quessenberry and so on. That's not ideal from a run blocking perspective. You do downgrade in the run game from Ed Ingram to Dalton Reisner. That impacted this game. So that like plays a role here. We had a couple of other injuries over the course of the year a little bit. I think Blake Brandel got hurt a little bit. And so you had like 1 or 2 snaps from like backup guard. And that kind of adds up a little bit. So I think that probably plays a bigger role, but I don't want to discount the idea that his injuries haven't played like a pretty big role. I'm kind of curious because like it doesn't seem like he's running as decisively either. And that was kind of a huge strength of his. So I don't know what that's about. His yards after contact has continued to be pretty good. He's just receiving that contact a lot earlier. A lot of people will hear that and think that has a lot to do with the offensive line. That's not automatically true. Running backs do have some control in their yards before contact with the decisions that they make. And I think here it is a combination of the offensive line and Aaron Jones seemingly not playing with, an explosive, cut up field, that kind of step out into the hole. So I think that those are both kind of factors here.
Next question is from Ingram's Left Foot again. He asks, what does a Pat Jones contract extension look like?
So I kind of looked at a couple of the contract extensions over the past year, or signings, not just extensions. And I saw that DJ Wanham signed for something like $6.5-7 million a year. Davenport was like $6.5-7 million a year. I mean, I think he'd command a little bit more than that because both of them, I think, had Arden Key, I think, was $7 million a year. All of them had like more question marks about like their consistency or their health or maybe, work ethic type stuff. And those aren't really questions for Pat Jones. I mean, the consistency for sure, but when you watch him play, he's like consistently playing, pretty well. So I think he's probably closer to like $9 million a year once you account for stuff like cap inflation and the fact that he's much more responsible for his production than DJ Wanham was. And I'm imagining he'll probably get something like a 3-year salary with 1.5 years functionally guaranteed. So 3 years, $27 million with half of that guaranteed. So, $13.5 million guaranteed. Half of that probably in signing bonus, like $6.5 million in signing bonus. Something like that is what I'd expect given the role he plays in the Vikings, his production so far, and how he's getting that production.
Next question is from Swede Skoll, who asks, is Will Levis the real-life Bo Callahan? After chucking a 98-yard bomb for a TD, the most excitement I saw from his teammates was a pat on the helmet or a small high five. Meanwhile, everyone was super excited for the wide receiver on the play. I wonder if anyone came to his birthday.
So from my understanding is everyone loves Nick Akine Westbrook. That might just be part of it. It's like they were just super jazzed for him. If that keeps happening, that's a reasonable-ish question. But yeah, one play. I'm not gonna read that into that too much. But he's on Bo Callahan watch.
Yeah, the Bo Callahan watch here, people. Let's go to Andrew, who asks which Vikings assistants might be in line to get hired to coordinator level on another team this year. McCowan, Phillips.
I think probably like Durante Jones, who's been kind of trained to be a defensive coordinator for a little while now. He's the defensive backs coach under Brian Flores. So I could see that. Maybe Phillips. I mean, people are pretty hesitant to hire offensive coordinators that didn't do play calling, and the perception seems to be that Phillips is even less involved than a lot of these offensive coordinators. But we still see it happen. And in fact, that's what Kevin O'Connell was like, like that happens, right? So it wouldn't shock me or anything like that. But it feels like people talked about O'Connell more than they talk about Phillips, I guess is the best way to put it. And, maybe that's fair, maybe that's not. But it feels like somebody like a Durante Jones is much more likely to end up in a coordinator position than Phillips is in like a play caller position or something like that. So that's probably my instinct, but I don't know that there's like a ton of candidates on every roster that kind of fit that criteria.
Let's go to Arif Luenza, who asks, for Arif's draft evaluation corner, is Bo Nix a mirage, or were you wrong about him?
I checked in with a couple of quarterback people about Bo Nix because I was like, what's happening here? That's crazy to me. And they assured me that I'm right, and I don't have to worry about this, and I don't have to protect myself by forgetting my Bo Nix take in 3 years. So, yeah, the numbers are fake. Don't worry about it. I know that what Patrick Surtain was like, he's doing more than playing for Offensive Player of the Year right now. He's playing for MVP right now. Calm down, dude. You've doomed him. He's jinxed. He's going to be even worse now. So that's someone said I'm getting Mac Jones vibes from him. That's a lot. That's it's pretty aggressive. But hey, if it makes me right, let's do it.
Dusty had a lot of interesting things to say about Bo Nix on the Discord today, to the point where I nearly put him in timeout or banned him for spreading misinformation and lies on our Discord. Which only you and I are able to do that. Right?
Yeah. No, we're empowered to spread disinformation. Was he calling Bo Nix good?
He was beginning to. Yeah, it was a little awkward.
Oh, that's pretty dangerous. I'm glad you nipped that in the bud.
Yeah. Well, it's important that somebody does. He said Sean Payton was not only right about Nix, but he's coached him up really well and gotten the team to work around him to showcase what he's good at. Nix is going to finish the season as the best rookie quarterback of the class and has a lot of room to improve, largely due to good coaching.
I admire your restraint for not banning him outright.
I did. I had responded with that ban button looks really tempting. Is correct me if I'm wrong, because I didn't get a chance to watch most of that game, and apparently he wasn't terrible in it. Is he throwing for more than 180 yards per game now?
Now he is. Yeah, he's got.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah, no, it's nice. He's throwing downfield a little bit too, which is kind of cool. He's got a couple of deep passes in there, which he wasn't doing at the beginning of the season.
Absolutely wasn't doing like that. I think when he beat the Jets, he had 70 yards of passing, something like that.
Yeah, but like he's had a couple of deep passes now. The deep passes are. Well, he's got as many touchdowns as interceptions, but otherwise they look pretty good on the deep balls, and his yards per attempt has crept up. His average depth of target has crept up. Just like it's like a good little. I mean, there's a reason his best game was against Carolina, but it's like a good little. Hey, man, good job.
Sean Payton, you get to have a quarterback for a bit. He's not good, but enjoy that. Kyle Sleeby asks, for James's passive-aggressive corner, we haven't visited this in far too long, who should be more insulted, Daniel Jones or Drew Lock?
That's an incredible question.
That is, actually. I want to say Drew Lock.
I want to say Drew Lock too, actually.
I feel like Daniel Jones knew this was coming. I feel like Drew Lock is being blindsided here.
Yeah, again, if I were his agent, I'd be livid.
We'd have some interesting posts by Adam Schefter, who's just copying and pasting the emails directly from the agents at this point.
Running
Brett,
them by Mr. Editor, yeah.
Exactly.
Sure.
Brett asks, what buddy comedy hijinks do Tommy and his agent get up to this time?
So someone told me that he fired that agent, which seems kind of like hard to believe, so I refuse to. So last season on this buddy comedy, the agent got inducted into the Italian American Sports Hall of Fame.
And they overexposed the hell out of him despite his quarterback play.
Yeah, so that one's going to be tough. I think what ends up happening is the family like starts up and earns a contract to actually open a restaurant in MetLife Stadium, because they had to do like the tailgate stuff, right? Yep. And they run it like an ineptly run family business, which is wonderful hijinks. Agent still has to get involved. He'll come up with like wacky promotions, like for every touchdown that Tommy Cutlets throws, customers will get a free sandwich. And it's worded poorly, and so customers start redeeming them for pick sixes. Just normal sitcom stuff.
Yeah, mix that with every episode of Bar Rescue you've ever seen where the place is failing, and you'll have that restaurant.
I can't wait.
It'll be perfect. James K, for James's audio engineering corner, what is your DAW of choice? Basically, what piece of software? By the way, we're about to go off the rails completely here. The software I use to edit the show is in Pro Tools. I've been a Pro Tools guy since I was in college. Since the very beginning of college stuff. So we use that, and I typically use Waves plugins, but the stuff to finish it, I believe, is Ozone stuff. So if you have any further questions on the technical side of things, go ahead and DM me. I'd be happy to talk shop. And I've helped start a number of podcasts. So check it out. Beef Brewski asks, for Arif's Sumo Adoyo corner, given the challenges sumo wrestling faces in modernizing while preserving its traditions, what do you think are the most effective strategies to engage younger fans and expand its global reach, other than, say, have a weekly feature on a podcast that is clearly not aimed at sumo at sumo watchers?
We're doing a wonderful job right now. Well, I think actually they're doing a really good job of it. I mean, there used to be a significant bias both in coverage and in the ability to join a stable, and in even like in judging about foreign sumo wrestlers. And I'm not going to say that that's gone, but they've done a really good job of winnowing that down and allowing more foreign wrestlers to take prominent positions, join really prestigious stables, and represent, the highest highs that sumo has to offer. There used to be such a bias against, especially Mongolian sumo wrestlers, but Polynesian sumo wrestlers as well, and we're getting sumo wrestlers from Eastern Europe. So like all of that was a big problem. Now we've got kind of a wider range of it. And what's really cool about that is that after they participate, after they retire, they generally go back to their home countries. Not all of them. Some of them like continue to participate in Japanese sumo culture, but they go back to their home countries and kind of educate people about the sport, kind of spread the word. And it's really engaging. So I think they're actually doing a much better job than one might expect. The problem, of course, Beef Brewski, is that there is a tension between, modernizing the sport or making the sport kind of something that is appealing to modern fans while also maintaining kind of the tradition of sumo. And that's like more important to sumo because it's like a deep Japanese cultural product that goes all the way back, centuries, that's designed to preserve elements of samurai culture and so on, that it's really significant to that culture. We're running into some problems right now. We've got another question that actually engages with that. But I think one issue is that the way that, and this is true across cultures, this is not like a Japan-specific criticism, the way that people go about, quote-unquote, preserving tradition is they over-romanticize the past, and they assign values to past participants or past traditions that don't actually comport with reality. And I think being honest about that does a better job honoring the past and also engages people in new ways. In fact, there's a lot of really good research that suggests that anytime you engage somebody with history, they're much more likely to be interested and learn about history if you're honest to them about it, instead of presenting a sanitized version of history that kind of deifies historical figures. They realize, like, in the United States, for example, that the founding fathers were flawed, and yet they were still able to produce, documents that sustained, a country that's so prominent on the global stage, that kind of stuff. I think that that's one area where Japan could do a little bit more, is be a little bit more honest about kind of the nature of their historical traditions and not bend to them in a way that romanticizes the past while still honoring a lot of those traditions.
Next question is from Deez, who still is being gifted a front row seat to the next live show. You're welcome to show up, Deez. I promise I'll take care of you. Deez, for Arif's Sumo Corner, with the November Basho onto the second week, who has impressed you most, and where do you stand on the Henka maneuver? It is very divisive in the community, as you know, and I'm curious about your thoughts on it.
Okay, so the November Basho has been really exciting so far. We've seen a couple of upsets here. We've seen a couple of underperformers. What's really exciting is that somehow I was kind of right about some stuff, which is incredible. Ono Sato's having a phenomenal tournament. He's 7-2. Hoshoryu is 8-1. He's having a great tournament. The only person having a better tournament is Kodozakura, who's 8-1 as well. I mentioned that Wakata Kakage is having kind of a weaker stretch, and he may be one of the Rikishi who could be overtaken by Hoshoryu, and that's exactly what's happening. He's still got a winning record. He's 6-3, but he's not wrestling up to the level of a lot of these other Ozeki. And now we're at a point where I think like a year and a half ago, people were asking like, hey, what's happening to elite level or high level sumo? And now people are asking, hey, are we actually in one of the stronger periods for high-level sumo? And that could be kind of where we're at. I think that's really cool. So there's a bunch of really great sumo happening right now. And I think that's like some of it. And there's a couple of people that are worth watching, like Takara Fuji 7-2, Onokatsu 7-2. That's awesome. So with that, the question about the Henka maneuver. So this one, like you mentioned, is controversial. So for people who are kind of unfamiliar, there is, which I know is not many of you, but there's always new listeners every podcast. At the beginning of every match, sumo wrestlers are expected to kind of explode out of their stance and engage with each other right away. There's a name for that. Taichi, I think. Maybe I got that wrong. I probably got that super wrong. I think it's like another syllable. I probably got that way wrong. But
I mean, if it was written down, I would attempt to say it as my pronunciations, and have been just spot on the past week or so.
Yeah, I mean, we go to you for pronunciation, so for sure.
Yeah. This won't bite me in the ass at all.
No. So that's kind of the initial point of contact, and it's meant to kind of be an explosion of power, right? And so that's when you see a bunch of like the really hard hitting stuff. And, it's like one reason that the sumo matches are typically resolved fairly quickly. But as you can imagine, if both wrestlers are expected to run into each other at full speed with like the full weight, some of them are like 380 pounds, right? The full weight of what they can do. Some wrestlers, especially smaller wrestlers, are much more likely to use that to their advantage and get out of the way. And sometimes they'll add, something to that sidestep, sometimes they won't. And in sumo, obviously, if anything, hits the floor other than your feet, you're done for. If you step out of the ring, you're done for. Those are the two ways you lose. And so you can run past the wrestler, or you can, in attempting to regain your balance, accidentally hit a knee or a hand onto the floor, right? And that'll get you out. This is, by some members of the sumo community, seen as dishonorable. Now, it actually is a little bit different. So the lower level you are, the less people care, and not just because people don't care as much about lower levels, but they just don't think it's as much of a question of honor in the lower levels. And also when there are size differences, they don't seem to care. So so lighter and smaller sumo wrestlers are given a lot more latitude when it comes to that. If you're a big sumo wrestler or you're competing at the very top level, there is kind of a taboo against it. Kind of famously, Hakuo, who's like one of the most famous recent yokozuna, used it in the final round of a basho that was really kind of meteoric, and a bunch of people had. And there's like a Mongolian thing about this too. A bunch of people had a lot of takes about this. But for me personally, I think that that's just not as big a deal, because I think, one, the reason that people are upset goes back to that history I was talking about tradition and honor and respect. And I just don't believe that they didn't used to do that either, right? The only kind of argument that I actually appreciate, that I want to engage with, is that the highest rank in that arena belongs to the audience members, is kind of how that tradition works. And audience members want an entertaining match, and this is not an entertaining move. It ends matches quickly. It doesn't look like there's any real contest here. But I think that's partially just a product of expectations. People retrain audiences in sports all the time. And so I don't think this is any more deceptive than play action. To me, it's get good. If you are just a linear athlete, you will struggle in sumo, and this is one of the ways you can struggle. It is not an undefeatable move. What ends up happening actually is that when you sidestep, you lose a lot of leverage and you're off your feet. A lot of times they'll say that you get lighter when you do something like that, a sidestep. And when you get lighter, you can lose. And so any skilled, balanced, or highly reactive sumo wrestler, good reaction time sumo wrestler, will have the ability to take advantage of you doing that, and you'll probably lose. It's a really high risk, high reward maneuver. And I think that kind of stuff is exciting. So I was asked, what are some effective strategies? I think it's to remove the taboo on moves like these, which still engage the fundamental features of sumo wrestling: tactics, strategy, psychology, but also leverage, balance, agility. All of those still matter. It's not just a contest of power, and that's what sumo fans keep on trying to explain to the rest of the world. It's not just about who's the biggest or who's the most powerful. There's a lot of psychology and strategy. Well, why not embrace that with maneuvers like the Henka maneuver, which a lot of people don't seem to like, but I think is just fundamental to the nature of these kinds of sports. And I think that the pushback against it tends to romanticize the past a little bit more than I think is appropriate. So I like it a lot. I think when big guys do it, it's as cool as when little guys do it. I might be the wrong person to ask, because my competition strategy has always been, in any sport, including sumo and debate, obviously, has always been to be the most annoying, obnoxious guy alive. And instead of ever going through, I always went around. That was just kind of the way I did debate. So I'm always sympathetic to this, but it's high risk, high reward. If it was like an undefeatable strategy, I would have some other opinions, but people lose a lot doing this too.
Yeah, it's important to remember that strategy does open you up to some problems. Whether it is sumo or whether it is debate, for sure.
Yeah, very comparable sports. Yeah.
Very, very much so. All right, this is going to be a question from Nolan Kaler, and this is for North Code. He's lamenting the loss of the Blue Bombers. They lost in the Grey Cup. You may have seen the highlights on Monday Night Football this evening of what happened. But I do enjoy the visual of the Mounties bringing down the trophy.
That's incredible. I mean, I want to add, the Mounties look goofy, and Dudley Do-Right has kind of like permeated our understanding of the Mounties. They are like cops. I just want to make that clear. They are goofy looking federalized police that are also kind of like an FBI. In addition to being, it's a weird story. So they're fun, but and they look silly, and I want to maintain that. But also, they are cops. I just want people to know that they are cops.
All right, boy, this entire question is in French.
Oh, interesting.
This will be a challenge. I haven't spoken French, really ever.
Right.
Now that I'm looking at this, so let's give this a try. Pour le code nord, esse quarif, arifat. Hold on, I can do better than this. Let me stretch. I don't want to pull anything here.
Right.
All right. All right, here we go.
Pour le code nord, est-ce qu'Arif a-t-il des remords pour son rejet de la langue française et son mépris flagrant de la culture canadienne qui ont coûté à nos frères de Bud Grant leur 3e coupe Grey consécutive? La nation n'acceptera qu'une réponse en français.
All right. That was good. That was
really good. Yeah, I mean, a couple of mistakes here and there, but I think mostly quite good.
So the translation of this is for North Code. Does Arif have any remorse for his rejection of the French language and blatant disregard for Canadian culture, which cost our brothers in Bud Grant their 3rd consecutive Grey Cup? The nation will only accept a response in French.
So good news. I don't want the nation to accept my response, and also Quebecois French is fake French anywhere, so I double don't respect it.
Let me just check the Libsyn numbers to see if we have any listeners in Quebec.
I guarantee you half of those listeners will agree with me anyway.
Self-hating Quebec. Okay, isolationists, I get it.
Yeah. So, no, I don't have any remorse, and I don't care if you accept my response in this distorted nasally French that you call French. Quebecois. No, I'm not. I'm good.
Okay, we actually do have a significant number of listeners in Quebec.
That's interesting. More
in Ontario than you would have expected. If you were going to rank the what's I'm looking for? I know the word for this. Provinces. Thank you.
Provinces?
Thank you, James. It would be Ontario, British Columbia, and then Quebec, and then Manitoba. But like Quebec and Manitoba are within like 2 of each other.
Well, that's interesting because like nobody lives in Manitoba, so the fact that they're close is kind of curious.
People live in Winnipeg.
Yeah, no, I've been there. I contest that.
What's the I'm trying to remember the name of the city in quotations that's on the border there. Well, it wasn't a big city or anything, but it was absolutely the small town that's like right on the border, right past Pembina. Come on, James, you're better than this, or at least I used to think so. Emerson, yes. Emerson, where you could cross. They used to have a strip club and a duty-free shop. That's what you got.
The 2 things you need. That's perfect.
Yep.
My take on Winnipeg, and here we're going to alienate the Manitoba listeners that we just discovered we had. Winnipeg, giant strip mall. Don't like it.
I was going to say anything about their poutine as opposed to Ontario.
I don't think they have a poutine culture.
Or if it's just not as pronounced.
Okay, yeah, it's not as pronounced. So, okay, I will give the Quebecois
Every year you pick a fight with the Canadians. Every year.
It's fantastic. Well, I keep on having to go, and I resent this. So
I happen to know for a fact you're going intentionally this time.
I don't know about intentionally. This is a requirement. I'm not happy. But the Quebecois claim to have been the ones who invented poutine, which I guess makes sense because it is a French name. But I kind of deny that they can get ownership over gravy on fries with cheese curds. That feels too American. Like, okay, the Canadians will claim whatever they can, right? Like, okay, you get Bare Naked Ladies, fine. You get Avril Lavigne, even, not Melissa.
Not underline Melissa.
Right, which is better. Honestly, you don't want Melissa, so fine, great. That also means you have to take on Justin Bieber. I'm sure that's a trade you'll accept because you also get Celine Dion in the trade. Like, it's fantastic, right? But
who gets Drake?
Oh, they get Drake. Come on. Like his whole deal. I mean, Views from the Six. That as soon as we learn about that title, they got him. It's forever. So but they will claim anything. Like they'll claim mac and cheese. They call it Kraft Dinner. They claim it, even though it was invented in the United States because it was invented by a Canadian in the United States. Which that's BS, man. First of all, multiple people, including a Canadian, were involved in the invention in the United States and was primarily sold in the United States. And if I know anything about the United States, is that they will claim anything an immigrant makes as American, because that is what America is. So Kraft Dinner, or what it's actually called, mac and cheese, that's American. Sorry. Not sorry, because that's what a Canadian would say.
Do you feel better about that?
Yes.
Good. Damian Barrett asks, how many of our referee goodwill tokens did we spend on yesterday's game, and how many do we have left for the season now?
Like points were just assigned a random number at the beginning of the year. So I don't know. No one knows. It's one of those things where, you know how, especially when you're in college, but a lot of people into their 40s, not calling anyone out, don't know how much money is in their bank account until they go to like maybe purchase Five Guys and find out they don't have enough for it. That's like a referee goodwill token, except you can't check your bank account, so you can't even be responsible about it.
No. You have that number floating above you, but you do not know what it is.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
Damian Barrett also asks, over the weekend, despite my better judgment, I sat down and watched an aging athlete battle a relative newcomer to the sport. The contest went back and forth before ultimately being settled as the young gun won with more points than his opponent. My question is this: if I wanted to waste my time watching an old washed pensioner drag their broken body around for a couple of hours in an attempt to relive former glory days, would I have been better off going to the Tyson Paul fight instead of the Colts-Jets game?
Man, the Tyson Paul fight was so disappointing. First of all, because you're cheering against both of them. But second, because it did start out interesting, right? 2 rounds. Tyson actually not just held his own; he won both rounds. And then after that, I
was struggling with the stream issue.
You weren't the only one for
the first. I don't know. Well, because I wanted to watch the women's fight because it looked interesting.
It was good. It was so both fights before it were good.
Yeah, I watched the one before it. The stream was working until the very end of it.
Yeah, and that fight started out not that great because one fighter, Ramos, just kept on dominating. But like they got back. It was a good back and forth. The women's fight was fantastic. Her like eye had split open because of a headbutt, which initially to me looked unintentional, but then the broadcast explained that this just somehow keeps happening when Taylor fights. Mm-hmm. Which okay. And it just kept splitting open, and she kept fighting through it. And then, everybody on Earth thought Serrano won, except the 3 judges. I don't know. Great fight, perfect for that's exactly boxing culture, where everyone disagrees with the judges on what happened. There was a villain, and the villain won. That's exactly what boxing is. And then the Tyson Paul fight,
yeah, which a
bunch of people watched on Twitter via Antonio Brown's
I love that
illegal stream. That's funny. That's so funny.
That was CT ESPN has its moments for sure. I will say that I wasn't going to watch the fight. And then my younger brother, because I knew exactly what was going to happen. It was going to be Tyson was going to look good for like 30 seconds. And then
4 minutes, actually.
Well, and then then Paul was going to realize, oh, hey, I can just sit here and jab him to death and be fine, and I'm just going to win on points for the rest of the, and he did that. So I was like, yeah, I know how this is going to look. If it doesn't end in the first 2 rounds, then it's not going to end. So
yeah, I took the under on total minutes of the fight because I that's what I expected. Which, I mean, it was 13 minutes. It's a pretty long over under, but man,
yeah. So I wasn't going to watch. And my younger brother is like, hey, I want to come over and watch the fight. And I'm like,
sure,
all right,
yeah,
sure. I've got a few minutes to spare. Because I'm old enough to remember how the Tyson fights used to go, so sure, why not? And he ended up coming by, and with all the problems with Netflix, you find yourself online looking for ways to find it, and you go from, let's say, stream to stream, as one does, trying to get things to work, and then you go back to Netflix trying to see if that's working yet, and it isn't, and it'll play, but it'll bring you right to the very beginning of the show. And if you try to fast forward at all, it'll give you some issues with it too. So it ends up being a big problem. And finally, you just find something that works and you stick with it. I think my younger brother said it best that, James, you were fighting harder to find a stream that worked than Tyson was the whole fight. Whew. So yeah, it was not great. We're going to not answer that question and instead go to Straight Cashman Homie, who asks, Dear James and Arif, my wife, God bless her, dove head first into the Vikings and football fandom 3 years ago, and we now watch every game together. I realize how fortunate I am, but there's one reoccurring issue. Every offseason, she swears off the team for letting her favorite players go. She's still bitter about Pat Pete and Adam Thielen. And this casts a cloud over the first few weeks of the season as she complains about these old flames. My problem is, Bynum's ray gun celebration made me realize this roster is reaching peak likability, and I'm dreading the complaints to come. Aside from some interior linemen, especially Ingram and Ryan Wright, you have to get pretty deep to identify guys who could go, and it wouldn't be at least a little sad or worrisome. So, who should I start negging, and what are the best ways to neg them so I can preempt this for next season? Thank you, Straight Cashman Homie.
I think one great way to do this is, I don't know what your wife or your political standing is, or like where you kind of position yourself, but just kind of make up stories about how these players voted for the ones you don't like. That's the easiest, because no one's going to check. So you're fine there. That one's easy. And it's always believable, right? Because, you don't know these players, right? After that, I think, trying to figure out kind of who you want to isolate and figure out kind of who's not going to come back. I think Andrew Van Ginkel, who's on a 1-year contract, will be coming back. Let me actually take a look at the contracts just to be double sure. Because I am worried about Cameron Bynum, who is both extremely likable, obviously, and has not received an extension yet. So let's take a look. Over the cap is being kind of buggy for me, so I have to go to Spot Track and take a look at the cap table. Okay, or not the cap table. I want the contract table. Contracts. There we go. So the players that will be hitting contracts or end year. Here we go. Are Cam Robinson, of course. I don't think you have to worry about that. It's not that he's unlikable, but certainly he hasn't, built up anything. Offensive lineman, makes a couple of mistakes. You don't need to worry about him. Byron Murphy, I don't think you need my help negging him. He's not awful, but 2-year contract. I mean, he's not been playing outstanding football. Probably fine there. Sam Darnold's going to be tough. That one's going to be really tough. I think you want to call him. You start suggesting he's a system quarterback, and he's wholly reliant on Kevin O'Connell. Remember, he's a coastal elite, so he voted for whoever you don't like, because you can just apply that to whoever you don't like, and it works, right? That's the party of coastal elites. That's perfect. Aaron Jones is tough. I don't know what to do about that one. That guy is insanely likable. Gosh. Okay. I wouldn't be surprised if he came back. So that's one, but I would, do a running backs don't matter kind of thing. And kind of like harp a little bit on these fumbles. That's kind of been a problem this year for him. Stephon Gilmore, he's probably gone. You're probably fine. Probably don't need my help on that one. Patrick Jones is tough. Say he's a Brian Flores guy. Say that, there's a reason he was only able to start producing this year. That's because of the blitz scheme, right? And, how the Vikings always put, Patrick Jones up against the weaker offensive tackle. That's not true, but it feels true. And then also create one-on-one matchups with the blitzes. So that kind of helps. Shaq Griffin, that one's not tough. Cameron Bynum, like I said, that one is really tough, especially because that one is actually kind of a difficult one to believe. He's really proud of his Filipino heritage. He's really likable. God, that one's, hopefully they re-sign him, I guess is my answer to that one. That one's tough. Nick Mullins, you don't need my help. Jerry Tillery, you don't need my help. Ryan Wright, you don't need my help. Dalton Reisner, you probably don't need my help. Jonathan Bullard hasn't been on camera that much. Johnny Munt, third tight end, don't got to worry about him. Brandon Powell.
He's typically just blocking here.
Right, yeah, you don't got to worry about that. Brandon Powell, you probably don't have to worry that much. He doesn't appear on the screen that often. So, yeah, those are the 2024 contracts that kind of concern me. I don't think that Josh Oliver, Andrew Van Ginkel is a 2-year contract. I think that Josh Oliver, Andrew Van Ginkel, you got to worry about too much. I think that they probably want to keep both of them. Probably Oliver at a lower contract, but if you were concerned about kind of advancing this, getting ahead of the game on some of these guys, like with Josh Oliver, talk about how big his current contract is and how that's restricted the team from re-signing some of your favorite players. So I think that's probably the way to go. So yeah, my first answer is to lie.
Josh Oliver's cap space is dooming us all.
His
cap hit is too much.
It's too much, yeah. Don't lie about Josh Metellus. If he leaves, you should be mad, actually.
Yeah. Finally, this episode from Dr. TWD, they ask, if there was a, quote, woke alternative league to the NFL, what would some of the team names be, and how would it differ from their big brother competitor? I'll give you some names of teams if you want to handle the other portion of that about how it would be different. A couple of team names that came up with the Unity Unicorns, the Diversity Dragons. Only a couple of these were from ChatGPT, by the way. Empowerment Elephants. I like that. The Invincible Inclusives, or the Inclusive Invincibles, whichever. The Progress Panthers.
Okay, I think so, because I've seen the whole list. I think that one's the weakest one, if I'm being honest.
Nope.
And the next 5 are bangers.
Let's go to the She/Her Sharks.
Yeah.
They Them Thunderbolts.
Perfect.
The Social Justice Warriors, which
got to have one of those teams. It's like the Dallas Cowboys. Got to have them.
Yep. The Safe Space Spartans, and the Title IX Coordinators.
That one rules so hard. I can't get over how good Title IX Coordinators is. That one is incredible. I love it. That's the team I'm cheering for.
Yeah, that's absolutely the Battlehawks of this particular league.
Incredible. Phenomenal vibes there.
So how would they be different?
Oh, I mean, you would have affirmative action and gender requirements. So affirmative action means you got to have at least one white corner on your team. You've got to have a good mix of...
Oh, and receiver.
Right. You got to have one white receiver, one white corner, for sure. Every team has to have at least one black quarterback. A lot of affirmative action. And then non-position specific affirmative action. You got to have some non-binary players. You got to have some players who identify as women, but genuinely, of course. You got to have a quota for all of those. You got to have a coaching staff that's diverse. And then you got to throw in a couple of hey, we don't have any Filipino players, so we got to have one of those, right? It's just, just a couple of random ones to just make people really mad. I think that's probably the way to go.
I feel like you could also have...
participation points. Sorry. You get points for every snap you play.
You took mine. You absolutely took mine. We were absolutely going to have participation trophies in this. I'm almost upset. Imagine what you could do with the weeks with the specialty weeks.
You have theme weeks every single week.
You could have them for like the Sunday games, the Thursday game, and the Monday one.
Oh my god! Holy crap! They would have a drag night. Oh, that actually rules. Holy crap!
There's your cheerleaders.
That's perfect. So instead of like Bloody Marys at tailgates before games, which I've learned now is more a Minnesota or Midwest thing. I thought it was like an everywhere thing. It's just drag brunch is actually your tailgate. Like, which that feels like a strictly an upgrade, if I'm being honest.
That locker room culture is going to be
awesome.
quite interesting. All right, well, and the celebrity fans too. I'm just waiting for the Chappell Rowan sighting every game.
Yeah, just like a Taylor Swift cam.
Yep.
Yeah. Perfect.
That happens every time somebody gets the ball. All right, so that's going to be the end of this episode of Norse Code. Hope you have enjoyed it. Arif, what do you have to plug?
So I talked about this neoliberalism piece for a while. Finally finished editing. Going to publish it sometime tomorrow. There's just like a couple of last things I have to do to the piece. It is 95% done. So we're going to have that piece on. It's going to be by my analysis of the election and then also my analysis of kind of like, what does this mean kind of stuff that I hope is going to be kind of a unique and fresh take from like all of the stuff we've seen so far. Warning, the first half is not going to be unique and fresh, but that's just how it is. So hopefully people like that. I've spent a lot of time on this. I hired an editor just for this. Otherwise, we've got, like I mentioned, Luke Braun's piece coming down the pike on Dalton Reisner and Ed Ingram. I've got my piece covering the Titans game. And then again, more people are heading to Blue Sky. My following has grown there a ton. And one thing I found is that a lot more people will click through on links on Blue Sky. And I think that is because you're more likely to see a link if you follow somebody who posts their work on Blue Sky than on Twitter. There's a lot of data that suggests this. So if you do want to get notified of when I post stories, this is not like a plug for socials, right? Because I'm not talking about Threads. I've got a Threads account too. It seems like Blue Sky is the best place to get notified of when writers post content. So at arif.bsky.social over on Blue Sky.
And just because I haven't updated the stinger in a while, it's worth noting that, as I'd mentioned last episode, that we are transitioning more into posts on Blue Sky than Twitter. I am still using Twitter for mailbag accumulation, but a number of the mailbag questions this episode were accumulated from the Blue Sky feed. So thank you so much. I'm accepting them Blue Sky or on Blue Sky on Twitter or through email or random DM. So thank you guys so much. For Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember that it's 4th and 12. You really think she's going to run here? And we'll be back later this week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of... and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or at my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merch. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
Hey, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.